Thank you very much. Thank you first to Sungju for nominating me and putting me forward to Irene, who then decided whether I was good enough to come here. So I'm very, very, very grateful to be here. And to Tess Mateo, who also nominated, because I'd heard a lot about this summit, and you hear about it, but you can't imagine the magic of having over 1,000 women together, all there to really support one another. And as Albright said, there's a special place in heaven for women who empower women, and I've definitely found this to be a very special place. So thank you. Now, I just wanted to ask you to stand if you have ever lived in a country that you weren't born in. So if you've ever migrated somewhere for some period. So more than half the room. Thank you, you phenomenal migrants. So this presentation is now for you. And for those who haven't, I'm sure that you have the privilege or the chance to migrate if you needed and wanted to. A special shout out quickly first to Australia, who has just produced a new type of visa. It's called the climate visa, and it's especially for those from the island of Tuvalu, where the island is now sinking, and actually the salt and the earth is so salty that it's becoming impossible to live there. And so Australia has opened up its borders, but this is unique. The fact is that the Western world, the global north, is closing its borders in so many ways. We've seen restrictions in visas, we've seen the restrictions in students being welcome. You're seeing it both in my country and countries across Europe and North America. So, why is that? I'm going to take you through a little personal story to bash some myths. Get out, you Paki. That's what was graffitied on our front door. We had bars on the window while I was growing up because so many times bricks would be thrown through the window. And we had petrol bombs coming through the front door, through the letterbox, because that was the only way of interjecting once we put the bars on the window. I'm not from Pakistan, but it's a way of degrading someone who looks like me. I'm from northern India, and I'm third generation British Indian. So why do we get those slurs? Well, there are 3 myths and I'm going to make it the 3 M's for myths and migrants. The first, that there's a lack of jobs and a lack of skills, and that the generally lowly skilled workers are coming. So let me just give a few facts. 1/4 of the world was colonized by my country, the UK. They say the sun never sets for the British Empire because literally every part of the world, as you go, there's always sunlight as you go across the British Empire. So much was taken from the colonies, still is and was then. To the extent that the word loot, you know when you loot something, you take something, that's a Hindi word. So much was looted from India that actually it came into the English dictionary, and that behavior is still there. So firstly, the looting. Now, the truth is that 1 in every 5 of us are migrants. And the other truth is that last year, yes, 100,000 people migrated to the UK. But what you don't hear is that 50,000 people left the UK. So the difference between immigration and emigration. So therefore, of every 2 people coming in, 1 is leaving. In fact, I'm sure all of you know Brits wherever you live, right? We're all throughout Australia, Spain, all across, you know it. They always have their their mark. So you know that those aren't ever considered as migrants. There's kind of a race undertone in migration. So my grandfather, 1 in every 6 of the British Army was from India, and my grandfather was one of them. My grandfather fought in the Second World War and was then asked to come to the UK to rebuild Britain. And I know the same is true for Berlin and most European cities. So you'd think that, do you think that he'd be a lowly skilled worker, therefore? In fact, if you've ever been to the UK, you'd know that if you've used the NHS or any of our services, whether you go into a restaurant, and in fact so many restaurants closed after Brexit, or indeed anywhere, the jobs that others don't want to do, migrants are doing. But they're not low-skilled jobs. They're doctors, lawyers, engineers. So my mother went into medicine, and my father became an engineer. And they experienced what so many migrants do, a glass ceiling. How many of us have, we're not undereducated. In fact, us women, 60% of women are graduating from the highest universities, vis-a-vis 40% of our male counterparts. It's not a lack of education, but rather a lack of opportunity. So the second myth, that they're taking our jobs. But actually, there's more jobs because of migrants. The fact is that of all startups, 36% of startups are started by migrants, which means that they're producing jobs, they're producing innovation. Although I've just applauded Australia for its visa, I'm also saddened that in Australia they've decided that they're going to restrict student visas. They say there's not enough housing, but it's actually not true. I was a student in Australia. I studied at the University of Melbourne. And I found that actually there is pre-built student housing. Like we all cram into, I was on Swanston Street in Melbourne. You all cram into student housing. And actually what you contribute to the economy is much more than what you take. And then the third myth. The myth that we take resources. The fact is that actually more is paid back in terms of tax than the social services that are taken. I'm part of that cohort that pay 50% of my income to the UK government. The top 1% of us UK earners are actually 24% of us are migrants of that 1%. I don't take anything from the education system. I'm giving to the education system, and I'm putting my children through private school and paying for that in addition after I've paid my taxes. So they're going to Eton and Westminster, etc. And that's all coming out of my own pocket. Then the NHS. We're not taking from the NHS. In fact, we have private cover, but on top of that, we contribute more to the NHS to the point that that 24% of that top 1%, are 10% of the national income of the whole of the UK. So it's rather short-sighted that the UK government right now are deciding to tax heavily that 1% even more, to the point that so many people are leaving, so many of that top 1% are leaving the UK. It's short-termism, and in the long term, it will be detrimental. I haven't even begun to say the final M would be more culture. The richness of diversity, which we've spoken so much about. If we attack diversity, you already know that we're kind of killing ourselves by attacking diversity. When Brexit happened, it was really on the basis of this story of migration. An incorrect, inaccurate story. And that divorce from Brexit, we know because you're having to suffer the consequences, I suffer the consequences every day. Not only has it been a very expensive divorce, but it's almost ludicrous because now restaurants are closing. The jobs that were being done aren't being done. Our economy is suffering as a result. I remember being on a bus with my son 30 years after those racist slurs. And during Brexit, as I'm on this bus, someone said, "Why don't you just go home?" And if I'd been quick-witted, I would have said, well, of course I'm going home. I'm going to Chelsea. That's where this bus is going. But instead, I just wanted to cover my son's ears. So this feeling of being othered, even though I'm third generation, is very acute and has shaped my entire life. I studied population and development, which is international development, which is why you're hearing these facts at the LSE. I'm a Sikh. Any Sikhs in the room, anyone who wears a ghara? You would be able to spot a Sikh because they all wear this golden or silver iron bangle. And this bangle means that you stand up for those that are being persecuted. And during 9/11, I was reporting from New York. As you heard, I'm a journalist. And when I'm reporting there, I was told to name Osama bin Laden in every single report that I did during 9/11. I refused to, because actually the people that were being attacked were Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, anyone who was other. And so I got a call from the Sheikh of Abu Dhabi, Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Nahyan. And he said, we've been watching your reports. The world knows about Muslims, and Muslims are often synonymous to terrorists. We'd like to change that narrative. It's great that there's Hollywood, and now there's Bollywood, and there's even Nollywood. But we'd like the Middle East to be known for something other than terrorism. And so a Sikh is meant to stand up for what's right and stand up for those that are persecuted. And so I went and took the job. I remember someone else in the panel saying how they felt underqualified. So I also did an MBA at the same time because I thought, venture capital, I think I should know what I'm doing. And as I do the MBA, my world opens up to what values, and we've heard so much about values, the difference that values actually can make. I'm going to take us into the final personal part of my story. So I'm walking to school. I'm 8 years old, and I get tripped up by a boy, my classmate. And when I get to school, I realize my nose is broken, there's blood all over my face, and I hadn't realized that when I tripped, how much damage had happened. And when I get to school, the teacher said, what happened? And the boy who tripped me up said, I just wanted to see if her blood was brown or black. He had never seen anyone of color, anyone other. So when you're other, you begin to think, what does this mean? How am I different? And I began to think about India, what my life would have been like if I'd stayed in India. I began to think about actually the best qualities of every part of the world. I wanted to visit everywhere. So now I've worked in over 175 countries, literally to find the best quality in every country, the best value in each and every place. Why? Because there's something to celebrate everywhere we go. And I believe that even though I've talked about the myths that need to be busted, the truth is that we all want to evolve into our very best selves. It doesn't matter whether you're born in the south, in the north, in the east, or west. We want to be the best we can be. And because of our country's geography, history, sociology, psychology, etc., what that best is slightly unique, slightly different. So you'll find in Bulgaria there's a real emphasis on health. You'll find in the US there's a real emphasis towards entrepreneurship because the way that country has been created through migration. You find that in every country that you go to, whether it's respect from Japan or Harambee, the togetherness in Kenya, or solidarity from Madagascar, every country has pivoted into a slightly different value or quality that they use to bring out the best in themselves. Why is this relevant to you? Because we still have work to do. Still, even though us women are educated, and perhaps more, and as I've said, more educated than the male counterpart, There is no woman of color as a FTSE 100 CEO. There are more people called John as CEOs than women of color. Even on the boards, we're under 1%. Under 1%. So I feel, given the context of this summit, given the migration story, and given what we could do as individuals, as you heard, I work with companies, governments, and individuals so that we can figure out what really matters to us, our core values. The aim of the Values Campus is not to stereotype the world. The aim is for us to look outside and then look inside. What is it that you would make a stand for? What is it that really makes a difference? And if I talk about values in a very dry way, it doesn't mean anything. If I say to you, what are your core values? It's really hard to get there. So in this, I ask pointed questions like, can you remember a time when you felt you were punched in the stomach, or when it felt like your nose broke, or when it felt like you were violated? We all remember times like this. For some people, it will be when they were lied to, because actually to them, honesty is really important. For some people, it will be justice. Any second-borns in the room? If you're the second child, or the third child, or just not the first child, sometimes justice is important. You get the point. It's a part of nature and nurture. But our values are deeply ingrained. They drive us to do incredible things, as you heard from the last panel, and they help us make a real difference. So if you'd like to know more about values, migration, and the rest, please do. There was, a QR code on the screen before. Feel free to get in touch on LinkedIn or any other platform. I have to say, it's been incredible to get to know you all. I just delayed my flight so that I'm not leaving straight after this panel, but at the end of the day. So thank you for the opportunity.